They lead, they enrich, they create, they help. You're listening to The CEOs on News Talk 770. Brought to you by TriView Capital with your host, Angela Kokott.
So nice to have you along for our CEO series. You know, a slowdown in the economy has all of us watching our pennies, which is a lot more difficult for those who have so few pennies to begin with. Take that financial stress, add in some domestic abuse, a lack of education, and you've got a pretty good picture of the many clients the YWCA works with every year. Since 2010, Sue Tomney has been the Chief Executive Officer of the YWCA of Calgary. She brings to the organization a wealth of experience both in the nonprofit and private sector, where her strong communication and marketing skills have been a valuable asset. I am pleased to welcome Sue Tomney to the CEOs. Hello, Sue.
Hello.
Now, I have to tell the rules of the game every time I have someone in on the CEOs, just so you know. We do want to find out about the YWCA Calgary, Super. But more we want to find out about Sue Tomney and what makes Sue Tomney tick and how you came to where you are today. So Thank you so much for playing along with us. And I love the fact that I usually say to people, so where'd you grow up? And they say, Calgary, Renfrew, you know, when I asked you this, where did you grow up? You covered a lot of territory. Give me an idea of some of the places you've been.
Well, having been a Navy brat, I was one of these kids who was born in California, lived in Japan for a while, lived in Hawaii for a while, lived in Florida for a while, and then ended up here in Calgary. So a pretty large span of geography.
I want to find out how you got to Calgary, but maybe in those formative years then, were you from a big family, a small family?
Small family, so just my sister and I, and just two of us.
You often hear from people who are military brats or Navy brats that really was a positive for so many reasons. Some people loved going to different schools and having to make more friends, new friends. What was it like for Sue Tomney?
You know, I did like it. I don't think I knew anything different, so I never looked back and said, oh, that was terrible. And it was lots of great experiences, and you learn how to make friends fast, and you have a great story to tell when somebody wants you to tell your story. So that's always entertaining. And probably, you know, the only thing maybe that I look back on is, you know, I'd be hard pressed to tell you who my grade 1 teacher is or who my grade 2 teacher was. But other than that, it really, I think, helped to formulate who I am by moving around.
I want to talk about the influences in your life, your parents, your father, I'm guessing, was the Navy career. So what was your mom like? What kind of an influence in your life was your mom?
You know, it's interesting because when you were saying that about my dad being the Navy person, my dad graduated from Annapolis, from the Naval Academy in the day when there was only men. So, he was the one who was in the military. Interestingly, and maybe speaks to who I am, my mother was an activist. So my mother was the type, I remember riding on her shoulders in Berkeley, California in about 1965 in an anti-Vietnam War march. So that's who she was, married to a naval officer. Not surprisingly, the marriage didn't last all that long. It certainly is an interesting mix in terms of my personality, though. So that's who she was.
Then what brought you to Calgary?
When they divorced, when I was 13, my mother's family was from Calgary, and so my sister stayed with my dad in Florida, and eventually my stepmom and I came up here to live with my mother in snowy Calgary from Florida. So that was quite a shift.
You have to say that again. Wait, eventually your stepmom and you came to Calgary to live with your mom? Did I mishear that?
I'm sorry, my sister stayed with my dad and my stepsisters and my stepmom, and I decided I wanted to come up here and live with my mom and try out Calgary.
Okay.
So, yeah. Well, that'd be interesting.
And were you a young teenager then when you came to Calgary?
Yes. Yeah, 13.
What was it like going from Florida, and obviously you were all around the world, to come and settle in Calgary then?
You know, if Calgary in those days, for those people who listen who were around in sort of the late 70s, it was a small town back then. It was about 350, 400,000 people, and it was a great place. It was cold, but I think I'd had enough heat for a while that was new to me. So snow and all of that was a great adventure, and it was a town that right from the get-go embraced me, I think, as a teenager. And so
you stayed pretty much much you've stayed in Calgary all that time?
I have, yeah.
I'm always curious if your journey took you through post-secondary education. Did you go somewhere after high school?
I didn't. I went directly to work. I think I was the kind of, music was a big piece of who I was in those days, and was singing in a band. And also I really wanted to go out and earn my way, and took courses over the years at college in the evening and that, but just launched right in and wanted to, that feeling of earning a paycheck, I think, was just too much for me.
You touched on music. So what kind of a student were you, whether it be elementary, junior high, high school? How would you describe yourself as a student?
I would say that I was an energetic student. I loved school. I loved being there. I didn't work particularly hard. I could have studied a lot more. I marvel at kids these days, how hard they have to work at. And I look at my daughter and how hard she works at it. But I really enjoyed school, and I enjoyed my teachers. I loved drama. I loved music. And so, and being involved at school. So I think my teachers liked me because I was the one who'd throw my hand up, not necessarily the one who got A's on my exams.
So did the report card say, could have applied herself more?
Yeah. Enthusiastic, but could study a little bit more.
Well, I have to find out more about this musician in you then. So you sang in a band? Did you play an instrument? Were you the rocker chick?
Yeah. This is, okay, you have to think early 80s and Calgary in those days. And yeah, we were combating disco at that time. Although I love listening to disco, but of course that was coming out, and anybody who played in rock bands had to pretend they hated it because it was taking our business. But no, I sang and played some keyboards, and this was the days of, there weren't a lot of female singers. This was Blondie. This was, there was only
I see a bit of
handful.
Deborah Harry in you. Yeah. And you know what? I know you're listening on the radio, but tomorrow we always post our video of the interview. So you definitely will have to check out our Facebook video just to see Sue. But definitely there's a bit of Blondie in you. So who did you emulate at the time, or who did you look up to in those early rocking days?
You know what? I think in those days I loved Heart. Loved, the women writers were the big pieces for us, because the other woman in the band, we were the two writers and the two leaders of the band. So we looked up to anybody who could actually compose, and because it's hard. So anybody who could do successful albums and that, we really admired. So it was probably more the writing skills as much as the singing skills in those days.
We've got a lot of faithful listeners, and a lot of them have been in Calgary for many years. So can you remember any nightclubs you performed at? Did you have a name? Sue, remember, this is also video. She's making lots of faces right here. Tomorrow when she watches the video, she'll say, oh, that's right, I'm making all those faces. But okay, so I'm sure, I don't know if any of the nightclubs are still around, but what were some of the names?
You know what? So sang in a band called Mantra. So anybody who I'm sure there are people out there who would know the band Mantra. And then the band that eventually went on, to cut an album, was a band called Adventures in Paradise. And so, in those days, the nightclubs were things like, believe it or not, the Cecil, the Town and Country.
These places aren't around anymore, are they?
Bonus Hotel. I'm trying to think about on the Carriage House Inn.
Yes, Carriage House.
The Westgate. I mean,
Westgate, that was a great place. Okay, yes, now you're bringing back memories for me. And it's not supposed to be about me, it's about you. My guest this hour for our CEOs is Sue Tomney. She is the CEO of YWCA of Calgary. Musician, sure, but we're going to find out a lot more about Sue coming up next. The CEO series, and of course, every week we love to introduce you to someone behind the scenes, someone in front of the camera, in front of the scenes, not necessarily in television. Sue Tomney is the CEO of YWCA of Calgary, and I have received a text. One person does remember both Mantra and Adventures in Paradise. Someone else is also asking about your married life, and I don't know if we want to get them. Pete, I'll make sure that you can text Pete back.
You bet.
So that's what happens sometimes when people are listening. They say, wait, is that the same person? So you actually did end up cutting an album, did you say? So did you have to tour and everything else?
We didn't tour. And this is, there's a lesson here in terms of self-confidence. And we could have. I think there was a part of me that always felt like I needed to be able to continue to work and be in Calgary, and never was really confident to let that go and hit the road. And you know, I'm sitting here with you, and I guess that was the right decision, but it is something about, you know, taking that extra risk.
That risk.
Yeah.
And so do you think deep down you're not as much of a risk taker as you'd like to be?
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably. I would like to see my kids feel a little more confident to go out and do that, but I certainly don't regret not doing that.
Which is kind of interesting to hear from someone who would have been a singer in a band. That takes a lot of confidence too, right?
It does.
So I guess it's just a different definition sometimes too.
Exactly.
Well, then at what point did you say that this music career isn't going where I want it to go, or I've got to get something? Maybe this goes back to your risk or adversity to risk, that you had to have something more secure?
Yeah, I think, and as I said, you know, disco music was coming. You know, we did cut a record and it did okay, but, you know, always still worked to pay the bills. And so it just, my other career started to get interesting, and did some singing in that, and just kind of faded over the years. And I think it was one of those gradually then suddenly. It didn't really just happen that I decided to leave it. I got older.
Your kids, and I know you've got 3 young adults, they must love the stories of their mom being a musician.
I don't know. I don't
Or
know
it's
if
embarrassing.
I think it's probably a bit of that. They don't exactly come home at nights and say, "Let's listen to your album, Mom." I'm not sure they've listened to the whole thing, but
Plus, they have to find a record player.
exactly.
All right. So what were the jobs that you were doing while you were also working on your music career then?
Well, from paying bills, it's an interesting story. I was working for the Bank of Montreal downtown, main branch. Remember the first, you see, I'm giving it all away now in terms of age. I remember the first Instabank machine that came to the Bank of Montreal, and I think it was the first in Calgary.
Wow. That's
Crazy.
That was going to revolutionize things. Wait, it did.
Yeah, exactly.
So you were working as a teller?
As a teller,
Yeah.
yeah. Back in the day, a lead teller, because in those days that there only were really tellers. So did a bit of that. Worked in the oil patch for a while as a secretary in the day during the crash of the early 80s, which is a life lesson that sticks with you forever.
How old were you then when you learned that life lesson?
About 20.
And that life lesson, did you lose your job?
I didn't, and I was lucky, and the companies I worked for kept getting acquired, because it was, you know, that was another part of the early 80s oil patch. People were buying each other up, and I think probably because I could talk a fast game, maybe they just kept keeping me on, and I didn't, but I watched what it did to other people, and it was again, it was something that stays with you.
Yeah, and luckily you didn't live through that. A lot of people right now are living through that. So
Yeah.
that's obviously something you can take through life in understanding people and the ups and downs of our sector.
Yeah.
So did you just keep changing business cards then with the companies that kept acquiring each other?
Yeah, pretty much.
When did you then, because eventually you did get out of oil and gas. So what was the next step?
You'll love this. Heard an ad on the radio station, and they needed someone to do sales promotions in radio, and thought, hey, I think I'd like to do that. And so ventured into radio for a few years, and worked for the Moffat communications chain back in the day. And you know, these were you look back and they weren't necessarily career moves. They were lifestyle moves. It looked like fun, and I was young, and did a few years in radio. And so that was, and it was great fun and great learning.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun when you're in your 20s.
Yeah.
Some of us just never grow up. And so you were in a promotions capacity at that point. Did that for a few years.
Yeah.
You've got a great timeline here. What's next on your
then-
Facebook timeline?
You know what? And then from there, again, another career move. I was married at the time, and my son was 1, and I wanted him to be able to visit family that's all over the U.S., as you can appreciate from the beginning of my story, and thought, I need to work for an airline. That's what I need to do, because then I can fly around and I can visit family, and it won't cost that much. And threw my hat in the ring for a job back in the day of Canadian Airlines. God bless Canadian Airlines.
Yeah.
And worked for Canadian for 5 years, and really enjoyed that, and traveled lots. Didn't pay great, you know. The airlines, that's not really why you're there. You're there for the passion and, again, sort of the lifestyle, and really from there, it's when I was really bit by the whole community investment and social good bug because of my job.
In those 5 years then at Canadian Airlines, what were your jobs? It sounds like you would have done a few in that time.
Yeah, I started out, floating as an executive assistant, actually. Someone had said, just get your foot in the door, and then you can apply for other jobs, which was great advice. So I sort of took a deep breath and decided to do that, and then applied for a role in the community relations department. And you know what? It just stuck. And, that I think was the real beginning of my career path, and was able to really dig in and enjoy that ride.
Okay, so now we're at a point where you really know where you're going. Mm-hmm. So maybe I want to look back at this point, because I'm often interested, whether it's someone when you were very young, someone when you were in school, was there someone you really say you admired their leadership skills, or they influenced you for some particular reason?
Yeah. You know what? It was a lot of teachers. Very, very fortunate, in my day. And when I was in high school, there was always a musical production, and the musical production had, the band, school band played. And so it was a lot of drama and music teachers who were insightful. And then, just being really blessed by people who just said, go for it. I don't ever remember a teacher or even someone I worked for who said you can't do that. So I think by virtue of not having that, I just was lucky to be surrounded by people who gave me great opportunities.
Your high school years, would they have been in Calgary?
Yep.
So then give a shout out to your high school.
Yeah, Central Memorial High School back in the day.
And they had a great theater program then.
Oh, we did Bye Bye Birdie. We did Fiddler on the Roof. I mean, those were, just fantastic fun years.
Your face really lights up. Are you involved at all in theater or music now?
What? I'm not. And it's something for me I think about now that my kids are just my daughter's the last one to be launched, that I probably need to look back. It's been a busy life sort of with them. I still play guitar, so I still, sing for myself more than anything else. But so I still do that. But yeah, not to the extent. That's probably it'll be full circle. I'll come back to that career, hopefully.
I like your advice, though, or the advice someone gave you, that even as an executive, just get your foot in the door, just apply. Do you think sometimes young people, I never want to sound like young people nowadays, but do you think sometimes they go to school for a specific thing and they think that job, they only want a specific job? Because even listening to your path, it's been full of variety.
Yeah. You know what? It's a different time. So again, Calgary was, a third of the size. So I do recognize that the world has changed somewhat there. But I encourage my kids. You never know what door will open. And getting in the door to a particular organization, you also get a feel for that organization. So you get a sense of whether you like that culture and whether it's for you, whether it's a fit, and they get to know you. So I think if you wait sometimes too long for the perfect job, you can be missing opportunities to try out.
And missing opportunities that you think, I went to school to be X. Well, wait a second. I'm discovering I really love Y.
Yeah. And you know what? I have met in my 4 years at the YW, it's interesting that the folks that I'll talk to who say, you know what, this isn't at all what I set out to do. And I think I just ended up here. So more often than not, in my line of work these days, it's folks who never thought they'd end up there. So I think it's more frequent than we realize, career paths that shift.
Did you leave Canadian, or did Canadian leave you?
I left Canadian. You know what?
Because there was a lot of changes in the airline industry too, so
yeah.
I didn't know what happened. But.
Yeah, no, I left. It was in the day when Air Canada had made a bid to take over, and there was such fierce pride in Canadian, and it for those of us Air Canada was the enemy. It was really tough to watch that coming, and so for me, I just couldn't do it. And an opportunity came up, and I thought, you know what, I want to leave while I still have this great feeling for the time, and feel so blessed for the experience that I had. And I had folks who hung in there and then moved over to Air Canada and great experiences. For me, it was the right time to leave after about 5 years.
It's almost like a politician crossing the floor. They didn't like them, and now they're going to have to like them. I didn't mean to slip in politics. So when you left Canadian, I've got 45 seconds here. What was your next step?
next step was into deregulated power, or the cusp of, and joined TransAlta Corporation after that.
Wait a second. I thought you liked exciting things. We're going to find out about that. And actually, we have TransAlta CEO coming in a couple of weeks, so I've got to watch what I say. But my guest this hour is Sue Tomney. She is the CEO of YWCA of Calgary, finding out how then she went from TransAlta to eventually get to the YWCA. And I'll get to that after this. And yes, I will be interviewing Dawn Farrell from TransAlta in a couple of weeks. And so I was just kidding. My guest this half hour, Sue Tomney, she is the CEO of YWCA of Calgary, because at this point in her journey, she has left Canadian Airlines and has gone to TransAlta. And I just joked because if you listen long enough to Sue, great personality, has always taken jobs for the experience, whether it was in radio, lots of fun. So what drew you to TransAlta?
You know what? In the day, money. To be honest, at that point had a two small children, and it was an opportunity, and it was leading up to deregulation. So this is sort of mid-90s, 96, and was attracted by the fact that TransAlta was getting ready to build this team to go into a competitive marketplace, and so it was just an interesting challenge. It was a building operation, and the money was good, and it seemed like the right time.
Now, at this point, though, because you've left Canadian where you were more in community engagement, so this seems like a nice fit for sure. So is it communications? Is it marketing? Is it a bit of both that you're really taking on with TransAlta?
Yeah, and it's certainly, in terms of opportunities, that was a company that was incredibly good to me, because my portfolio grew over the years, but was initially brought over to do special events and community investment. So near and dear to my heart, what I'd done at Canadian Airlines, and a long history at TransAlta doing things in the community across the province. And so it was fun to go over there and pick up on that and help to grow that. So it was a really good fit that then led to more communications and government relations, et cetera. So
then where do you go from TransAlta?
Well, from TransAlta, I'd always hired people as part of my team from other sectors. So I liked hiring people who'd worked in government. I liked hiring people who'd worked in the not-for-profit sector, because I always appreciated the lens that they brought. They brought a different lens than just a corporate lens. And the more that I did that, the more in the back of my head I thought, you know what, I need to do that. I've spent my entire career in the corporate sector. I've not worked in government. I've not worked in community investment. And you know what? It just had reached this point where I'd pretty much done all the things that I thought I could do at TransAlta, and felt incredibly blessed, and just thought, you know what? I'm going to try something different. And as I say to people, I didn't do the math, which was good, because if I had, I think I would have scared myself away from doing it, and decided to make the leap, and took a couple of roles in the not-for-profit sector that eventually led to the YW.
And was it just that you knew that you wanted to give back, or as you say, you had hired people from those different sectors and thought, I've got to experience it as well? I
think it was that. It was really, I wanted to experience what they had experienced, and just wanted to give that a try. And I had some great advice from a friend who said, you can always go back. If you leap sectors, you can always go back at the end of the day. And so I did sort of take a deep breath, and I just wanted to see what it was like when you were working for an organization that had to raise money and work with government in different ways. And it's been a great experience.
You joined the YWCA in 2010. Obviously, they saw incredible potential because you had done so much in the corporate sector, and then your time in the non-profit sector, that they probably had the ideal candidates. Did they come to you, or did you go to them?
It's interesting. I had heard that the former CEO was stepping down after a decade of service at the YW, and I'd heard it through the grapevine, and I actually reached out to a friend who worked for a search firm, and I said, do you know who's doing the search? Because if it's you, I want to throw my hat in the ring. This is something that I would love, and ended up getting a call back not too long after that, and she said to me, we won the RFP, so we are doing the search for the CEO, so get me your CV. You're the first in the door. So I did go after it that way, and because it sounded so intriguing, and it just, things happen for a reason, and here I am.
Sounds like the actor who hears of a movie script and says, okay, I want to read for that. But all right, so what was it, though, about the YWCA that really spoke to you?
You know what? There was a few things. So one would be that my grandfather was actually the executive director of the YMCA in Calgary back in the early 70s, late 60s. So I had that sense of what, why YWs, YMs mean. Mm-hmm. So I will admit, once I started investigating more about the YW, I was shocked at how much I didn't know. But I had the brand in my head, and I knew what that meant. I knew what the reputation was. So that was a big part of it. And I'd also, in the early days when my oldest was, a toddler, the YW had the only drop-in childcare in downtown Calgary. So when the babysitter was sick, that was the only place that I could take my son. So I also had that experience, and also I remembered as a teenager, my mother had some troubling times, and I know that she stayed at the YW in Vancouver, and so way back in my mind, the YWs had touched my life in an interesting way. So it was really that heartstring that pulled me to want to look into it.
I want to take a break here, Sue, because you admit that you knew the brand but didn't really know all the things that it does. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that's also a challenge as the CEO to be able to make sure Albertans, Canadians know exactly what the YWCA does in their community. This is the CEOs. I'm Angela Kokott. We are talking with Sue Tomney from YWCA of Calgary. Back after this. Sue Tomney is my guest from the YWCA of Calgary. I love the fact that she actually, when she heard there was an opening, that she said to her friend, hey, if you know who's doing the hiring, I'm definitely interested. And they obviously were definitely interested in you. But you touched on the fact that you had different connections with the YWCA, whether it was your grandfather or your mother in Vancouver's situation. Would you say that most people have a preconceived idea of what the YWCA is?
Absolutely. And I'll give you a snippet of that. A funny story. When I told my middle child, my son Liam, that I had been hired at the YW, I said to him, "So Liam, what do you think about the YW? Do you know what the YW is?" And he goes, "Yeah, isn't that a place where self-conscious women go to work out?" And Really, Liam? And he said, yeah. So the fitness side of things, I think, has been so strong in the YWYM brands. I think people do tend to think that's their immediate response, and don't really know the rest of the story. It's a well-kept secret, unfortunately.
Well, and as the CEO, that's your challenge. Yes. And you've been at it for almost 5 years now. How do you, let's use this show to tell people that it is more than a pool and workout facility. Yeah. It's not even a pool downtown anymore, is it?
It's not even a workout facility thanks to the flood 2 years ago.
Of course, that's right.
Yeah. So, it's not that. And over the years, that had evolved anyways, the YW. But we've always been about helping women and meeting them where they need us most. That's always been the essence of the YW. And for us, that is about education, it's about counseling, and it's about housing and keeping a roof over their head. So for us, it's about, helping vulnerable women pick themselves up, get what they need to get back into community and thrive in community. So our programs are all focused around that. And that includes, women and their families, but it starts with a woman.
And really, in my introduction, I said that probably painting a picture of most of the clients, or many of the clients, they may be facing some type of abuse. They may be financially disadvantaged. They may be underemployed. But that probably is only scratching the surface. Is it hard to really draw a picture of the clients that the YWCA serves, other than to say there are women?
Yeah. You know what? It is, because it shifts, whether it's a mom who's a single mom who's dropping off her child at our childcare center, whether it's a woman who, has to spend the night on a cot on our gymnasium floor during the winter as part of our winter emergency response program so that she won't freeze to death, frankly. Whether it's a woman who's coming to us because she doesn't have, enough English skills, language skills to be able to speak with her children. Mm-hmm. And she maybe has been in Calgary for years and has just reached that point that she can no longer communicate. So it is broad, which can be daunting, but it's so immensely satisfying and really speaks to the diversity of Calgary in this community.
I wonder if sometimes do you think that we're trying to be too many things to too many people?
Yeah, for us that is the task sometimes, and why we say for most vulnerable right now for us, and we always have the opportunity. I laugh and I say, you know what, one day I'd like it if we just have to open another pool and be Aquabelles again like we were, because those societal issues will have gone away. But for now, it really is around helping women who need us the most, and quite often it is those women who do have financial restraints and are not able to access some of the resources that others can.
So you're hit with the flood a couple of years ago. Will we ever see the fitness area opened again? Was that a time that you had to say, we've got to look at the cost of this and whether we should be putting our dollar somewhere else?
Right. Well, for us, health and wellness will always be part of the mix. It's, mind, spirit, body has always been the core of the YW movement. So health and wellness will be in the future. What that looks like would not be a 3-story high gymnasium as it would have been back in the day, or frankly, a pool that's operationally is very expensive to run. So in its current state, no, but health and wellness, as we look towards a new building in the future, will definitely play a part in the new YW.
And I want to find out more about that new building, but let's just take a break here. Sue Tomney is my guest. You're listening to The CEOs. I'm Angela Kokott. Back after this. Wrapping things up with my CEO this week, Sue Tomney with YWCA Calgary. So you know that the new building, as you alluded to, will not probably have as much a focus on fitness. It'll be fitness in some capacity. New building, is that a dream? Is that closer to reality? Tell me about that.
It's closer to reality. Right now, we are in the process of working at selling the current site that we are at, which is downtown on 5th Avenue Southeast. Basically, the building has become mission prohibitive, and it's a ranch-style house on a large city block that, back in 1972, the board saw fit to acquire that, and it was great, and now 40 some odd years later, it doesn't serve its purposes, but we do have an asset that we can leverage. So we're in the process of doing that, and in conversations with how we would look to build a new building in partnership, hopefully, with some folks that we've been talking to, and very excited about how that will enable the YW to contribute again for the next 40 years in this community.
How difficult is it for an organization like the YWCA when we have downturns in the economy? You talk about being young and seeing people losing their job around you. How is that then for an organization that really relies on donations, on grants? How do you get through these times?
You know what? It is. It's kind of a perverse reality, right? Because you have a downturn in an economy where you have more people who need help, and that help may very well be fathers who are suddenly unemployed who need parenting skills because they haven't been the ones staying at home while the wives are having to work. It comes across in many different ways. So a downturn in the economy actually increases need in the community. And yet, funds tend to decrease, whether it's government funding and cuts that have to happen, corporate Calgary because of what's gone on with oil prices. So, it's not the first time, but it's an interesting quandary that we're up against. And for us, it's a matter of tightening our belts and getting creative and really getting the word out that in these times, the need actually is increased and we need that help.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, though, especially from an organizational standpoint, because they've been through it, just like oil companies and provinces have been through it. I wonder if you're almost better prepared that you keep things fairly lean all the time and that you can handle the ups and downs. I'm getting to the point where corporations and governments might be able to learn from nonprofit organizations.
Yeah. You know what? I think we try to be as conservative as possible because we recognize that, things can happen quickly. And the first thing that usually to go, unfortunately, does tend to be the community investment budgets for a company, or it does tend to be those extra dollars that a Calgarian may have given last Christmas that they're not feeling confident enough to be able to give this Christmas. So I think we do walk that edge a bit better. But, for us too, it's also, it prohibits us sometimes from taking that risk and being able to be creative. So there's a balance there in the future that we'd like to get to. But yeah, I think we are a little bit closer to the action. And so we watch ourselves just because we see the need faster maybe than somebody on the 20th floor of a tower.
Sue, I haven't mentioned that you're a single mom. You've got three, as I said, 17 to 24-year-old young children, adult children. Does that allow you then to even understand more what your clients have gone through? That must bring such a great understanding to knowing that you're a single mom trying to juggle a lot of things.
Yeah. For me, it's been a real blessing, I think, because I know how difficult that can be, and yet I've been very fortunate in terms of work, in terms of friends, and Calgary being able to help that way. And there are many people out there. I'm not sure how I could have done that without that, and yet the women that we see don't have those families. They don't have those friends. They don't have the job. And so I think it makes it that much more real. I remember how tough it can be emotionally, and I didn't have all of that on top of it all. So it does keep it very real.
If someone were to describe Sue Tomney's leadership skills, how would you like them to describe you?
For me, I would. The word that always resonates for me is being authentic, that it's real, that what they see is really who I am, and empowering. I've been very fortunate. You've heard my career path here, and it wasn't ever a straight line, and I think that's because people saw things in me and believed in me, and so I would hope that from a leadership standpoint, people would say she believed in me and gave me a chance, and that I would hope that I would pass that along to my employees and folks.
So where is Sue going to be 10 years from now?
I always love to say a little grass shack on the north shore of Oahu. But I'm not sure I'd ever be able to leave all of this.
Sounds like a big risk.
Exactly. I'm not. See, there you go. Yeah. Well, you know what? I have the best job in Calgary. And so I would, if I'm doing exactly what I'm doing now, I'd be happy as a clam. But I would hope that wherever I am, I would have the same opportunity to be able to contribute back, and especially to be able to give back to a city that's taken such good care of me.
Sue, thanks so much for the conversation.
Thank you.
Sue